He's one of the most versatile sports reporters in the nation. He's covered everything from the Iditarod to NASCAR to college football games. And not only is he talented, he's trusted. As Jackie Sherrill says, coaches trust Jack because they know Jack knows what the real story is. Tonight, the Tallahassee Quarterback Club welcomes the legendary Jack Arute.
1977. How many of you were following the Florida State Seminoles back in '77? And you know where I'm headed. There was this young coach that had been brought in the year before. His name was Bobby Bowden, and people weren't really sure what to make of this Alabama wannabe. In 1977, I was working for the Motor Racing Network. It had just been founded by Bill France in NASCAR down in Daytona Beach, Florida. And in addition to doing the Daytona 500 and a bunch of what was then called Winston Cup races, Grand National races, we secured the rights to a brand new bowl game, the Tangerine Bowl. Now, I had played football, not very well. In fact, quit my sophomore season when I said to the coach, "Coach, I quit." And he goes, "Why?" And I said, "I haven't dressed for a single game, including home games. I'm tired of being the center, and you put a nose guard over me in practice, and I have the snot beat out of me every day." And that's when the coach put his arm around me and said, "Jack, what took you so long?" But I knew a little bit about football, but I didn't know much about Florida State other than when I looked it up and told me that at one time it was a women's college. So I thought, I need to go meet this coach. So I call up Bobby Bowden. He doesn't know me, I don't know him. "Coach Bowden?" "Yes, son, what can I do for you?" "Coach Bowden, my name's Jack Arute, and I'm going to be doing the broadcast of the Tangerine Bowl, and I'd like to come up to visit with you." "Well, you come on up here." Bobby Bowden opened his office and spent 2 solid days with me, talking about his team, what his dreams, what his hopes were, back then quite simply, to win a bowl game against Texas Tech University. So now let's fast forward to that awfully chilly night in Orlando, Florida. At the end of the night, it was 40-17, and Bobby Bowden had his first scalp to put on the mantle. From that day forward, I became very, very closely aligned with Coach Bowden. And through the ups and the downs, and we all suffered with you, when all of a sudden hope would spring that we were going to finally get that national championship. And then something would go awry. And then we go to guys like Charlie Ward. I was walking through and thinking back all those nights and all those games that were played here that I covered with Keith Jackson and with Bob Greasy. When all of a sudden the Seminoles would come out and there would be Renegade and there would be Chief Osceola. And while other universities were struggling with having a mascot that was related to our Native Americans, the Seminole tribe was intrinsically involved in the direction that the Seminoles and Renegade and Chief Osceola were taking. They called it the erector set back then. And I used to come up here and I can remember down in the far end zone, there would be the big spear.
Yeah, we remember that.
And it would light up and it would get louder and louder and louder. But I also remember going down to Coral Gables, Florida to interview Gino Torretta and some of that merry band of men as they were getting ready to come up here to play Florida State. And all I heard about is, "It's not going to happen. We got the ring, baby. We got the ring." And one guy says to me, "I'm going to tell you what. They're going to go up there and we're not afraid of that horse. We don't care about that Indian." And I had gotten wind that what the linemen were going to do, the entire starting squad for the University of Miami was going to surround the logo. So being a good employee of ABC, "Keith, I think we better be rolling on this when it happens." And he goes, "Check by Gutty, I think you're right, buddy. Make sure you have a camera isolated." And out they come and everything, and they've strutted their stuff, and they're not wearing camo, but they are not intimidated by the Florida State Seminoles. We're talking about guys that are like 6'8", 350 pounds. Renegade takes off from the far end zone with the spear ablaze and with Osceola on top. And that horse got to the 30-yard line, and I saw when to this day I'm convinced that somebody paid that one non-starting, and I could identify with him, but at least he got to dress for the game, that got engaged in the fight with the wide receiver for Florida. And lo and behold, both of them were thrown out of the game. Well, I don't know why they threw the kid out of the game from Florida State, because he wasn't going to ever play. But it was a stroke of genius. Or I was here the time when all of a sudden, it's not the Clemson game that I'm talking about this year. Don't remember a quarterback by nickname Rooster? No, Rooster delivered the bacon? Yeah, that's what we're talking about. That to me is what Florida State football has always represented. That to me is why I can sit here and watch what has happened in the last 2 years and just marvel. When I look at an unblemished record, and with all due respect to everybody, and I do this every single day, you know, I just want to see Florida State lose. Thank you, Bubba from Alabama. Nobody likes a winner. I mean, I'm a Boston Red Sox fan through and through. If you listen to my show, you hear George O'Leary ask me, he goes, Jack, are you a Red Sox fan? I go, yeah, I'm not them Sox. And he just deadpans, I'm a Yankees fan. Well, they used to say that the rivalry was like a hammer and nail. And I'm beginning to believe it. Yeah, rivalry's a hammer and a nail. The Boston Red Sox are the nail, and the Yankees have been the hammer. Well, nobody likes the Yankees. Nobody likes a winner. When Jimmy Johnson was winning in NASCAR, not everybody liked him. Anybody but Jimmy Johnson. Anybody but Dale Earnhardt. Anybody but Jeff Gordon. Anybody but Florida State. You can't win 26 games and be unblemished and not have people be envious. But I wanted to share with you one of the theories that I have as to why the envy is so strong. Remember that connection that I told you about with Bobby Bowden and aspiring Alabama? He wanted to be the coach at Alabama. Well, do you remember when Florida State was an independent and it was offered the opportunity? They weren't just courted by the Atlantic Coast Conference. There were also back channel offers that were made to join the SEC. And that discussion, I know for a fact, took place and it was animated. And then it took a bunch of people with singer heads saying, why would you want to join the SEC when you can go to a basketball conference called the Atlantic Coast Conference and win all the time? And you did. And you did, and you did, and you did. But then lo and behold, like anything else, because it's all cyclical, the Atlantic Coast Conference, they got better. Your performance as Florida State University rose everybody's boat, made them work harder, made them go to work, made them invest in infrastructure, and made them go out and recruit in the state of Florida. The SEC is envious of Florida State because they don't consider you an ACC opponent. They consider you an SEC level opponent. I'll put your defense year in and year out up against any defense at Alabama, Auburn, Georgia, Florida, you name it. Ditto for offense. And why is that? Because the state of Florida has been very, very productive of talent. Now, when I first got started in this business, there were 3 major universities here. You had a choice. You could go and be courted and go to Florida, you can go to Miami, or you can go to Florida State University. The choice oftentimes came down to being on the sidelines on your recruiting trip and who won the game. Now, on many occasions, I was here for the Miami games, and it was, oh, Nelly, wide right, and wide right too, and wide left. Bobby Bowden told me that was when he decided not only was he going to be in charge of making the only offer to a quarterback for a scholarship, he was going to sign him a kicker. He also told me that was when he came up with the adage, you know the difference between a halo and a noose? He said, when you're winning, the halo's up here. When you're losing, the noose slips 6 inches, and a halo becomes a noose. I asked him one time, I said, Bobby, what do you do when it's 4th and short? He said, well, some schools just plain old fire the coach. I think that's what happened happened at the University of Florida this weekend.
Our guys just amazing. What a special group of guys. Everybody talks about this team. It doesn't do this, it doesn't do that. Measure this team for 60 minutes. When you measure this team for 60 minutes, it measures up pretty daggone good to anybody, anywhere. Anybody, anywhere. Everybody has flaws. But this team, what we've done here is they believe in each other, they love each other. They're a family. They play for each other. They never panic. They look each other in the eye, and they handle the next play. They get it down, they wheel it down to three. We down 3 scores, go to 2 scores, get it down to 1 score. Just take care of your business. They able to execute. Now, like I said, we need to play better early, no doubt, but that's what this team does. It's accountable to each other, and it plays for each other. And that's how you define success to me, is when you have a family that loves, trusts, and believes in each other, cares for each other, and plays. If that's not what this game is about, then we've all missed the boat.
When you have a family that loves each other, trusts each other, plays with each other, that's what college football is supposed to be about. Now, we can spend all the time that we want parsing through the what I call exterior noise. But I prefer to concentrate on what Jimbo Fisher just said. That is, ladies and gentlemen, what makes this Florida State Seminole team and last year's Florida State Seminole team unique and true winners. Those of you that were at the Rose Bowl last year, we're talking about 13 seconds difference. That wasn't a cakewalk. That was a hard-fought game. Now, I'm sure that there are a bunch of people out there that just want to hate on Florida State because you won 26 straight games. You're also the ones that put an end to the SEC domination. And he said the other thing, because I had a great deal of difficulty with the camera. It was like this giant cyclops eye when I first started. And I had this, look, I had my name in a vowel, so I probably look a little shifty to begin with, right? And my eyes were dark. And Jim came up and put his arm on my shoulder one day and he said, Jack, take a deep breath. Here's what I want you to do. He said, I want you to think that you're talking to your buddy on the far end of the couch. What? He said, no, come on, think about it. That camera is your buddy. I said, okay. And he explained to me, and all of a sudden, I never forgot it. He basically said, just think that it's alive. Talk to him the way you would make focus and talk. Never had a problem with the camera ever again. You make fun of me going to the Iditarod. One of the great things that I loved about the Iditarod sled dog race, besides the fact that I went from Florida to Anchorage, Alaska, and to Nome, Alaska in the middle of March, late February, early March, was the purity of the competition. Do you know what the grand prize for the Iditarod was back in those 1990s? A brand new Dodge pickup truck. Golly gee. And then they increased it. You got the pickup truck and you got a check for $10,000. Golly gee. And people would spend their entire lives raising dogs, mushing across the frozen tundra. They didn't do it for the money, and they certainly as hell didn't do it for the pickup truck. What they did it for was to test themselves against the elements and against their peers. And when you won the Iditarod, they call it the last great race. And one of the things that I did for the years that I covered it is I said, I'm not going to stay in Anchorage. They said, well, you know, what you should do is just stay in Anchorage. We'll send the video. I said, how am I going to know what it feels like? I went the entire 1,100 miles, not on a dog sled, but on snow machine. I will share with you one thing. You think it's been cold around here lately? You want to know what cold is? Cold is when you've got every conceivable layered piece of warm weather clothing. And you know that you have to relieve yourself. And you say, screw it. To me, the most monumental, must-see college football game that is contested each and every year. It's quite simply called Army-Navy. I work with an organization called Military Appreciation Partnerships. And what our goal is we work with college coaches, we work with the astronauts, we work with IndyCar drivers, and we go downrange. I've been to Iran, I've been to Afghanistan, I've been to Turkey, I've been to Bahrain, and we bring them in. And our men and women in service, you want to talk about a humbling moment. When they come up and are lined out the door to meet you, and they say, thank you for coming. And you have to say, no, thank you. Well, anyways, the long and the short of the matter is I was downrange with one of these groups, and we landed on an aircraft carrier. And when I got there, one of the junior grade officers says, Jack Arute, I played in the Army-Navy game the year the Navy won, and you were there and you interviewed me. And I just smiled. And then one of his fellow Army guys that was actually on the aircraft carrier said, yeah, he never lets me forget it. Well, lo and behold, at the aircraft carrier, the Abraham Lincoln, there was the Army-Navy football, right there in the trophies. They call them the one-percenters. You know, we look at people here in college football, and we're, trying to speculate who's going to go on and play on Sundays. Every one of those people that you'll see compete in that Army-Navy game are going to go on and they're going to play. On Sundays, Mondays, Tuesdays. They're the 1% that allows us to have the debates and enjoy what we're enjoying here. So please, I urge all of you, come on Saturday week, check it out. Hey, it's a ball. I'd like to answer some questions if you have any.
We've got time for 2 or 3 questions, but I have one to start with. When I was searching the internet, I found a YouTube of you doing the ALS challenge.
Hey, I want to encourage all of you to listen to my show, Mondays through Fridays, 1 o'clock to 4 o'clock, depending on what day you're with the College Sports Nation on Sirius XM Channel 91. You can be subjected to Rick Neuheisel, whining and crying like a 3-year-old baby because the Pac-12 not getting the respect that he deserves. Or you might be able to hear Gino Torretta as I ask him as often as I can, how many ceiling tiles are on the ceiling of the Superdome where he was consistently knocked on his ass in 1993. And then, of course, there's Tim Brown. Oh, don't get excited, number 81. He doesn't have any more eligibility. We looked. And then all you hear from Tim Brown is, it's all about Notre Dame and no one else. And then there's my good friend Houston Nutt, who sends his best wishes. You left a great impression upon the coach. And he was my co-host today, and he said, please make sure that you say hello to all my friends in Tallahassee. So Houston, the mission has been accomplished. Thank you.
Everyone, Jack Arute, please. Stay right here, Jack.
I'm going to use this with Neuheisel.
The first person to use the whistle. Thank you so much, and we appreciate you. Jack said he will sign some autographs, shake some hands, come meeting, and we'll see you December 9th with a toy. Meeting adjourned.